Okay, this is Carol Allen, so I would like to call the meeting to order. Can you do the roll call, please, Ray?
Yeah, Jeffrey one. I see him, he raised his hand.
I'm here.
Here.
Twyla Harrington,
Here.
Victoria Rizzo,
Here.
Tanny Stephenson. Here. Rich Allen.
Here.
Soon-to-be member, David Ribma.
Here.
And Tara, excuse me, I hadn't turned on the projector yet.
Oh,
But we can still go, the meeting's doing fine, it's just that we can't see what's on the screen.
okay. All right, number 2 is public comment. I'd like to invite the public for comment. Is there any on the web, online?
I think Mr. Wilcox is the only one, and he's not raising his hand.
Okay, is there anybody in? Frank?
Is the mic on?
I'm assuming so.
For the record, can everyone hear me?
And Frank, you're so pretty, I forgot to turn on your camera.
Oh. Right, it's because we have similarities, is that it?
Yes, lack of follow-ups.
Oh, I could say so, I'm not gonna say it though. For the record, Frank Stevens, Troutdale resident. So I want to thank all you guys for the hard work you put in. I had a chance to actually go through the original IGA today. I was kind of comparing the two, and I had some questions for you that I think might come up in committee or in the when we do the actual sit down and figure out what we're going to do and where we're going to go. I know that's not going to be public, so we can figure it out for the contract. So the big one that really stood out to me was the beach patrol. It's on Appendix B of the original IGA, which was 25% of 2 SROs for deputies. I know that we allocated, but I wasn't sure if that came out of our budget from this year for the beach patrol or for the beach officer. Is it 2 separate things? I don't know if that's an add-in, something to look at between the two. If we originally had it in there and it's not there now, what happened to it would be my question. The reason I bring that up is I've been heavily involved with the Chop Chop Trail and the upcoming Sandy River Trail. And this green space is really not a highlight for the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office unless we call them. So I'd like to see that become either its own separate beach patrol as a supplement or part of our contract where they're required to patrol it, especially in the summer. I've had cases of vehicles on the shared use path. Maria and I are actually talking about an RV that's currently down on Harlow Road.
Excuse me, you don't check your email often enough.
I don't.
An hour ago, I told you it's gone.
Oh, good. Just to bring them up to speed. I'm sorry, Mr. Young.
No, that's fine, I'm okay.
Yeah, to bring it up to speed, so 9 months of keeping an eye on this trail, seeing how basically as a study or research project with Portland State where I graduated, and doing a bike and ped count. Unfortunately, that led to how many vehicles are utilizing the I-84 shared use path, which is the underpass that is going to connect Chop Chop Trail and Sandy River Trail. If we don't get a grip on how we're going to handle that from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, it's going to be an issue in the future. And that includes 257th and Harlow. There's 4 different jurisdictions all in that one area, 5 if you include across the river. It gets really complicated really quick, and there's a lot of limits to what county can do. So we have to work, as Mr. Young knows, we have to work with all the other entities as well. So just some quick highlights. I would like to reflect on the HOPE team and the fact that they haven't been actually doing their job per se. They've been pulled back to do patrol, at least for the last 6 months. I think it's even more than that. That's something we want to focus on. I don't know if that needs to be in the contract. The 311 process, oh my God, it is so broken, guys. When you make the phone call, I'm usually on hold for 40 minutes. If I get through, yeah. Honestly, just call Ray. That's my new motto. It'd be nice to have a dispatch actually here that when I walk in as a Troutdale resident and I say, hey, I'm a Troutdale resident, they will actually go, oh, hey, can I help you, rather than just dial 311 or 911. That's not the answer to a Troutdale resident. So, and then as far as staffing, I would hope that they continue to go with a fully staffed Hope team, which I think in the future with the current Portland mayor, we are going to see a huge influx of push out from Portland, especially in the vehicle arena. I don't know if it'll be on the transits, but I think we're going to see a big push on RVs and other things heading our way. Yeah, I hate to say we're going to be the gatekeepers of the gorge, but I kind of see that in our near future rather than gateway to the gorge. And then enforcement, it really comes down to it has to be a combined effort. I'd like to explore the potential for a park ranger to keep an eye on our green spaces. We have some, and then also look at maybe getting a more defined plan on what we already have built for homeless in our ordinance, but making that open to the public so they know who to call and when. I know we have a website, but I think it needs to be updated for sure. Just some ideas. Hopefully I didn't take up too much of your time, and thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you.
And Frank, I'll just jump. If you ever want a discussion and me to go through the contract and that beach deputy stuff, I'd be happy to go through that with you.
Yeah, that'd be
And explain it all to you. It's an interesting question, and I got the answers for you.
Good.
Yeah, it's an interesting area. Learned a lot from his exposure to it. Hi, I'm Gail Stevens. I'm the other half of that. I'm the numbers person. So in reviewing the document, first of all, I want to say thank you. This has been, I can tell you everyone's been doing an awful lot of work on this in both the fire and on the police side. I like the directions of the conversations that are happening and will need to be have over fire, rescue, and the police over the next decade. Really, and with the three little towns here together, we all are kind of in that same position where we're dependent on larger groups to be able to provide the services within the cities. I had a couple points. One, I also noticed if in comparing the old agreement, reading through the original IGA, it all looks really solid. Whatever decisions you make on service levels and things along that line, I think everything is currently in there. And whatever over the last decade that the city manager has had, either Mr. Young himself or anyone prior to him, or in place of him, I think they've been doing a really great job. And I don't see any addendums on the original IGA. I think the original IGA, as far as staffing, is the same. There's been two addendums.
Generally, two amendments. One is we added an additional FTE with our community resource deputy, Nick Boers. We had Corey. And the second one was we did a minor adjustment in how we interpret the beach deputies and how to make it more effective.
Okay, so did the beach, point of clarification, did that beach deputy come out of the FTE count?
No, we were already paying for 950 hours.
Yes.
We just redirected, just for memory for everyone. The county was acting like that person was locked to Glen Auto Park and could never leave, even if it was a rainy Friday. Or they assembled their 950 hours by having a staff meeting down there at the Glen Auto building with 8 deputies for an hour, and they got credit for 8 hours. We had a discussion about 2 years ago, and the answer as part of Frank's question is that we agreed that the deputy is free to go outside the park and do other things like traffic enforcement, homeless enforcement, and we just want them to focus there in the park when there's people in the park and there's a problem like a hot July day. So we did change. Okay. They're not locked to that piece of property.
So that basically half FTE that was in the original with the addendum of now 17.53 FTE. The city's, that half FTE, I'm going to guess, goes into the deputy line? Okay. So I guess my questions are just around coverage. And one, I appreciate the questions that were sent on behalf of the city by Mr. Young to both fire and to police. My question would be, if these results of the study, one says that when somebody walks up to the counter up here, no one responds to you, or has been experienced not just by my husband, but by other people we've spoken with, that they're told to just go report it or make a phone call or sit down at the computer, that that then got set up just about a month or so ago for them to do a report, that they don't take the report and the individual assigned, the deputy assigned to Troutdale that day is not contacted or asked to come to the counter to respond. The 311 is very painful. If you haven't tried to report something, feel free to give it a try, just for giggles. If removing the office assistant would be the person covering that front counter, then I would recommend putting that back in full-time, because we currently have one in the current contract. But whatever position is covering that counter when the building is open, it would be great if somebody actually takes the time to walk in the door here, that somebody would be responsive.
This is another long story, Gail. Would love to tell you guys this whole
I
story, because there's an
know
answer and it's not a good answer.
I know it's not a good answer. Maybe it's something that's in the agreement. I don't know. It's been noted by many people. The other piece that I noticed is that we currently have, under the old agreement, we have 11 deputies, one sergeant that was under what MCSO proposed. Our recommendation, or the city's proposal, the 1.5 for sergeants makes complete sense to me. But we dropped the 11 deputies down to 5.5. So if we already don't feel like we're getting coverage, how does cutting it in half actually help? And so our total FT, and we've added them elsewhere. So one of the pieces that I remember Mr. Young talking about it, one of the things where he was reviewing how much time they spend in the city on the streets patrolling, that there's a lot of 84 highway heading into Portland, because they're bringing people down to Multnomah County, to the courthouse, right? So is there a different position that can do that conveyance work, bringing somebody down there, versus the deputy that we really want in working our streets? Just looking at that as an option of not utilizing the coverage we're supposed to have in the city, instead of having them go all the way down to Portland to drop off an individual. But we are looking at, based on the proposal from the city, a drop of about 3 FTE, just under 3 FTE. So I'm not sure that that's the direction we want to go, but I appreciate the questions to them. I love that they came back with some cuts under the expenses. And I would encourage you to continue to push them a little bit on that information of what makes up the total cost of salary plus what they call OPE, or employment costs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to meet with you guys to go all these questions. I've lived this, so I got answers to everything you're asking.
Is there anybody else who has a comment? Okay. All right, so number 3 is consent agenda, 3.1 minutes from November 25th, 2024. Does anybody have any comments? Everybody have time to read them?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I move to approve the 3.1 consent agenda, November 25th, 2024 meeting as submitted.
Okay, and a second?
Second, Victoria.
Okay, and all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays? Okay, passed. All right, we're at update on police contract negotiations.
Great, thank you. One of the things that we try to do, we started this committee, well over a year ago, to try to get ahead of the curve on this whole process. And we have not made as much progress as we have hoped. And I kind of realized the other day, maybe I just wasn't thinking about it before, but we're negotiating with 2 different organizations that have no incentive to rush at all. For Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, bless their heart, we're like less than 2% of their budget. We're a fly on the rear end. I mean, it's just like, well, yeah, okay, yeah, we've got to negotiate with you. Gresham, until last fall, when they started planning for their budget next year, they didn't want to think about it either. And they had a new city manager coming on board, and Eric had to get acclimated, and so there was a lot of reasons why, no matter how soon we started this, started talking about it, we can't talk to ourselves. And up until about 6-7 months ago, neither one of them really was that interested. Not that they don't want to talk to us, but it wasn't a rush for them. But both these contracts, as you know, are almost half of our general fund budget. And so it is a huge deal to us what happens. On the police issue, as you saw, have I been here since the last meeting I had with the sheriff's office? I go back on my dates, I'm just so confused right now. I don't know that I was, so I'm gonna act like, if anything sounds repeating to you, let me know. But we met with them and they came back with their proposal. It was about 3 weeks ago, so maybe I haven't told you. They came back, if you look at the sheet that you had in your packet, it shows, we told them kind of what we wanted for FTE. They came back and told us what we'll have and how much they want to charge us. We went back to them and says, we can't afford that, but here's how we want to calculate. And then the third highlighted where it says FTE's response, that's what they gave to us 3 weeks ago. And we had a discussion in the room with them, was both John and Scott from their business office, and Carlos, the county attorney who oversees the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. And Ed and I were in the room with them. Ed and Carlos both were part of the negotiating, 10 years ago, so they're generally familiar with it. But it became pretty clear that, number one, the county departments had been told, we have to recover full, complete costs for all of our contracts. Troutdale's thrown in with all their contracts, whether it's joint office of homeless services contracts, whatever it is, they have to put full recovery. So the business office is operating under that direction. They have no policy-making authority. They're not going to talk necessarily about what we did 10 years ago and why, and how they convinced us to give up our Troutdale Police Department. So that doesn't mean anything to the, and I'm sorry for every accountant out in the world, but the bean counters just care about the beans. They don't care about promises made and promises not kept, which a number of them have not been kept over the years. So they came back with this list, and we went through this list with them, and we looked at it and we went, all right, we get the captain thing, that we agreed that, we'll just want to pay for half, it's been our thing. In terms of the sergeant, they started off with 3, we came back with 1.5, because as you recall, there are 8 districts within the county. We make up 2 of the districts, which is 0.25. Again, if you can't follow the math, let me know, because I do this all the time, so it's just like falls off of me. It takes 5.5 FTE to cover a position 24/7, 365, because there is training, there is holidays, there's sick time, there's family leave time, all these things that take them away from their duties. So if you do the math, 5.5 FTE adds up to roughly 11,400 hours a year. If you do full-time hours in a year, there's like 8,200.
8760.
8760. And so whatever it is there's a 3,000 hour differential between what we need covered and what we pay for coverage, okay? Because even if one of our deputies goes on vacation, we still want a deputy, right? Somebody still has to cover it, the shift. And so that allows for approximately 490 hours per year that we pay for to make sure that we are paying on regular time. So that's why it's 5.5 is that number to cover all that stuff. And that's plenty of time for training, vacations, holidays, and all the rest. Well, if they have 5.5 sergeants on duty 24/7, 365, 25% of 5.5 is 1.375, right? So that's why our original contract was for 1.375. That's why, fine, we'll be nice, we'll round it up to 1.5. I mean, yeah, they have to also cover our resource deputy, Nick, sometimes too. I get that. So there's maybe some other reasons for it. But they came back with 3. Again, when I asked them why, nobody in the room could answer the question why. These numbers get generated and they don't tell me why. And they didn't, that's why I followed up with a letter. The FTE numbers that they gave us here for all of the positions, what it cost them, they're down to the dollar, right? So somebody had to think about it, right? And you saw my letter. Where's the worksheet? Just show us. You know, it's not like we think you're lying, but show us, because as you saw in my letter that I sent out last week, that seems like a huge increase over 10 years. And we just need to know why. Again, we don't know. So they couldn't explain why they are keeping us at 3 sergeants. When it came to the deputies, I asked them, well, why did you, we said we only can afford 5.5, and you came back with 11. I don't know. They didn't have an answer for why they kept that at 11. They said, maybe we'll have to have the chief deputy, Carrie Cares, come in and talk about patrol issues. But the issue is, we can only afford what we can afford. And the short answer to what Gail asked earlier is we felt, we've talked about this before, is if we increase the resource deputies from 1.5 to 3.0, that would cover a lot of that second district coverage. But the other thing is as we learned from our 2 districts, about 1/3 of the time they are called to regular cars outside the city limits of Troutdale, is that even if we only have 1 district, if there's extra calls, the person from the Gorge will get called from 911 to come out here. The Fairview deputies will get called. I mean, there'll be other deputies that will come take those calls. We just don't have to pay for 1/3 of our deputies' time being somewhere else. Let the county take care of that coverage. And so that's why we felt that losing 1 district wasn't really going to be that impactful on our safety, because other deputies are going to get called, and we're going to have extra resource deputies to make sure we had a second deputy approximately 2/3 of the time, and just lose 1/3 of the time that's covered by the sergeant and the other districts. So that kind of is in a nutshell why we went, but they couldn't tell me why they keep insisting on 11, okay? Detectives, we said 2, they agreed to 2. Why, I didn't explain, but I'm not gonna argue with them. The community resource deputy, they left it at 2. They couldn't answer me why they didn't. It probably goes back to why they were gonna keep 2 districts, but they didn't have an answer for that one either. So I don't know why. Anyway, on the office assistant, why did they take it from 2.5 that we came back with to 0? Again, I don't know. They didn't tell me. We know that the one we were paying for is not, they're not the records people. Those are the right here, the records people. The administrative assistant was what Troutdale Police had before, and that provides administrative backup to Troutdale work. Well, we learned really quickly, and it was proven absolutely, because the last 3 years, there's been no administrative assistant in that role. And life goes on. It's filled by our staff, it's filled by a couple, I don't know, PSAC, if you remember, about a year ago, they had a young man who was covering it for a couple months, helping out. He was a deputy that was on desk work, and so they assigned him for 3 months to be able to cover that. But since that time, it's just, so we were paying for something we weren't getting, so we went back with 2.5 to say, the things that we do need them to do, we'll give them a list, like checking business records, preparations for the PSAC meeting, the agenda, the minutes, and there's things for administrative assistant to do, but generally that administrative assistant was being used as administrative assistant for the whole patrol division that we were paying for. So that's why, but they don't tell me why they went to 0. Fine, if you don't want us to pay for one, you're still gonna do stuff. But then the records tech, they came down to 2, which was nice, because as you recall, they estimated that 4% of the cases that are handled come out of Troutdale. Well, again, they didn't know if some of those cases come because we process the tickets that come out of Fairview and Wood Village. And second of all, the number of cases don't tell you how much time a records person spends on a file. We don't have a lot of violent crime in Troutdale. It's practically nothing unless somebody invades Tandy's neighbor's house. But there's not a lot of paperwork. We don't have the assaults and the violence and the shootings that other parts of Multnomah County have. So it's not a quantitative, it's just a straight, oh, this is the number of cases. So they agreed to leave it at 2, which is fine. I think that's more realistic for us. And the other part of that problem too is when they had us pay for 2 in the original, they promised us 24/7, 365 coverage in the office over here, if you remember that. For the last 3 years, it's been, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. only. They shut it down because they haven't hired enough people to fill those spots. Okay, so we paid for this kind of record. So anyway, they're down to 2. That's great, let them leave it there. When it comes to records coordinator, fine, they need one of those. So we're essentially paying for 3 people in that office over there that covers the whole county. of the, something like 12 people over there. And, you know, that's one of those are generally lower ticket items when it comes to the FTE, but still, those numbers for office assistant, records tech, records coordinator, it's really hard to know what we should be paying for and what we're getting for what we're paying for. So we just have to estimate as best we can. And so we've always been willing to say, fine, we'll take those numbers, but it's the other ones, the big ticket ones we've been complaining about. So anyway, so you saw my letter, read through the letter, you know our response to them. All I got from them was, thanks, Ray, we got your letter, just acknowledging it. Cool. Just so you know also, I sent an email to the sheriff asking her to meet with her one-on-one because I wanted to explain to her some of the policy issues that, that John and his staff can't really make decisions on. She finally got back to me 4 days later and says, oh, thank you, and if you want to see the email, I'll send it to you, but we have a team working on it, and I just soon let them process it and get to the end, and then I'll talk to you later. Basically, it was a nice way of blowing me off. I responded back saying, I really would like to talk to you because what I just explained about that they are just doing numbers. They don't understand the bigger policy issues, and what we were promised 10 years ago doesn't matter to them. So I thought it was important. The other thing, and I've told the mayor this, and I've told other people, I forget sometimes, I tell this story so many times to different people, is that I don't think to the county commission, as you know, the sheriff will negotiate this contract. The sheriff will then recommend the contract to be approved by the county commission because the sheriff can't approve this contract because that's a money issue. And then they will approve it. And they're not involved in any of this negotiation. And how much money the sheriff's office gets from Troutdale, I will bet you will not impact one iota the budget for the sheriff's office that the county commission approves. They won't say, oh, you got an extra $1 million out of Troutdale. We'll give you an extra $1 million to do something more. I just have a hard time envisioning that that's going to matter at all to them. So I wonder what's their incentive to try to squeeze the last dime out of it for stuff that we don't really need. Additionally, just so you know, I do stuff during the week. I had a nice meeting last week with our new commissioner, Vince Jones-Dixon, who took Lori Stegman's place, and him and his chief of staff. I sent him copies of the letter I sent to the sheriff's office last week, and I sent him copies of the two transcripts from March of 2015, where I've highlighted it so he could go through and staff could see all the things that we were told. And I reminded them that Mayor Ripma was so smart, he really called them on, I don't believe we can get what you're promising for what you're asking us to pay. So we questioned them on the reality of it. So I wanted him, and he was very receptive. He really appreciated that information and getting our side of the story. They were going to talk to the sheriff's office. Great, get what they have to say about it. But I want to make sure he was on our loop because he'll be the person who's going to be one of the 5 voting on our contract. And he's our advocate. And he appreciates that. He knows that. He's our advocate with the sheriff's office and the rest of the commission. And so I want to make sure he was briefed on our situation so that we could get some help on it. So did all that with the sheriff's office. And one of the things that I've talked to a couple council members back ago, I know I've talked to Councilor One about this. When you look at their last number of roughly $7 million, and I look at what they're charging us here, I think there's a pathway for us to get there at a reasonable increase that doesn't argue with them about their FTE costs, because I don't have any basis to argue other than it seems like a real huge increase, is that, one, if we get them on the patrol districts to stay with the one district, that reduces our cost by $1.3 million roughly, all right, because it cuts that 2.6 number in half. Second of all, if we go back up, of course, under the community resource deputies and increase it from 2 to 3, that adds another $243,000 back into the equation. So we basically save $1.1 million roughly by eliminating one district, but adding an additional resource deputy. Then, as you saw my letter, I still don't understand the overtime number. All I get from them is, well, it's an actual cost. It's what we actually pay to cover the Troutdale districts. Without answering the bigger policy again, its policy is that, well, why can't your HR department hire enough people? Because remember, in my letter, it's a double dipping. We are paying 5.5, we are paying an extra 3,000 hours a year already to cover when the deputies are on leave, training, vacations, things like that. So why are we then also paying overtime if we're already paying for those shifts to be covered with regular time? I don't have an answer yet on that one. But if I run the numbers here and I go, let's lop off the $1.1 million to get those numbers right, we lop off the overtime. And what we did in the original contract was, overtime was a small number. I don't know, nobody knows why they came up with a $250,000 number in the original contract, but we were supposed to have a process that was never created where they were supposed to bill us every month or every quarter for when the deputies had to work overtime because of job duties. They had to come in for testifying at municipal court off shift. They had to go beyond shift time to take somebody to jail downtown. I mean, those are just small job-related stuff, and it varies from month to month, and so we were supposed to be billed. That never happened. So that should be in the contract too. I said, yeah, put it in there. Whatever is work-related overtime, great. Whatever is because you don't hire enough deputies, no. So if we reduce that cost, we have that varying cost in there, it gets us down to a number. The other one also is even if we get them from 3 to 2 sergeants, okay, that saves us, $305,000 off the 3 they keep pushing. And so, trust me on the math, I can show it to you if I want to, but you take what I just said and you put it down, it gets us down to $4.5 million, okay? That's 11 or 12% increase over what we're paying now, which is huge, because normally our increase at most had been 4.5%. But it gets us down to a number that I think our general fund can handle that kind of increase. And the mayor and I have talked a lot about this, Councilor One and I have talked about this. That gets us to a place where we can swallow that increase in addition to the fire contract increase that we're going to talk about in a minute. So that is where I think that, the negotiating team, when we meet again, after we get the information back from the sheriff's office, probably, we'll have Dave, Councilor One, Ed, and I, and Tanny, the negotiating team for the sheriff's contract, will meet and talk. But that's going to be my recommendation, is after they give us answers, is go back to them to try to get them down closer to the 4.5 number, to be done with it then. We still have the bigger issue to whether we want to ask the citizens to bring back the Troutdale Police Department with a local option levy. But we got to get through the next 2 or 3 years or 4 years before that can get vetted, approved by the citizens, and then ramp up a Troutdale Police Department to be able to be fully functional and operational. So we're going to need to have a number that we can live with for at least 3 to 4 years before the citizens even have a chance to do that. So as the mayor knows from our last meeting this afternoon, Ray just rambles on and talks. Any questions? The silence in the room does not tell me.
When do we expect to hear back?
I wish I could answer that question intelligently. What I'm going to say now is I'm leaving Wednesday for 10 days for vacation. Before I leave, I will send them an email going, we really, 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 really would love a response by the time I get back on the 24th, Monday the 24th. So I will send them that email and let them know, because we really want to start wrapping this stuff up. And so we have budget, of course, meetings in April, and I've already told Eric to assume a certain amount of large increase in both budgets for the budget, but we got to get a number, and I need to tell them we have to have time to process it and figure it out. So I will give them that email tomorrow.
Rich.
Just out of curiosity, do you happen to know if they have their own budgeting people, or if they're making use of the Portland budget people?
No, they have their
The
own.
county contracts a lot with them.
They have a department.
They have their own full department of number crunchers. And they figure out these numbers, and that's why they have enough people down there. That's why John, bless his heart, he's been good to work with, why he couldn't answer some of my questions, because he had somebody, one of the minions in the department, crunching these numbers for him and gave him the sheet. And I just want the sheets.
Right. I can't think of anything that they'd be waiting for at this point.
It's just not high on their priority list. That's the best I can answer. I mean, they haven't told me that, and they would deny that we're not a priority. Okay, the sheriff's done that. But as we learned last summer, when we had a meeting with them in April, They promised us a response to our request by the end of June. We got nothing. They promised us another day in July. We got nothing. We finally kept bugging them, and finally the second week in August, we finally got a response. It took them a while because I don't think it's a priority to them. And it's the same thing with the things. I bet I didn't go back and look, but I think a couple of these questions in this letter I asked 3 months ago in one of the other emails I sent in November, the same exact questions. Well, I'm sure one of them was the sergeants. How did you come up with the sergeant number? And that's still an unanswered question. And I keep thinking, if I have time, I have so many things I'm trying to get done before I leave. You know how vacation can be, work like a dog to get out of here. But I want to go back to that email and going, okay, I asked this question back in November and I'm repeating it now. Why? Why do I have to do that? Again, it shows me that, I don't know. Let's just say it feels disrespectful, like we're being dissed, is the old term. It's frustrating. So, anyway, hopefully I answered your question, Rich.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
Tammy?
Probably more questions than answers at this point, and I did forward some of these to Ray. But as an example, if you look at like the captain's salary, when I look at the county budget, I get $191,262. And then if I put all the fringe
That's
that I
salary, yeah, that's straight salary.
possibly put on that, I get $279,242, and they're billing us $380,442.
Which is really close to just adding the inflation over the last 10 years. God, it's 288.
But this is what they're paying today.
Right, that's what I'm saying though, but that would be consistent with just normal inflation on that cost.
I can't tie out their numbers. Same thing when I look at a deputy, they're paying $109,847. Loaded, I get $162,547, and they're billing us $243,647. And the last one I'll give you, records tech, they're paying $65,669. Loaded, I get $97,190. They're billing us $146,497. It would appear to me that also what they're billing us is about 12.89% of the overtime for the entire department. Now their budget's about 210 million, but that includes corrections, that includes a number of other things that are in that nugget. So if we're paying about $9,059,000, Troutdale is to the county, 210 million is the county law enforcement budget. That means about 2,174,000, right? If 24% of that's going to law enforcement. So that's how I got here. But
Yes,
it doesn't necessarily add up.
Right, that's what I see it too, that's the problem we have. Danny, you're right.
I've been over it and over it and over it, and I can't get back to their numbers.
So somebody who doesn't like numbers. Could these numbers also include like the vacation time, the sick leave, the insurance, the other things that we also have to cover per?
No, because, well, it shouldn't, because that typically is what fringe is.
Okay.
Fringe is everything above and beyond direct labor. Workman's comp and health benefits and.
Right, because they get paid, say, $109,000 a year for a deputy. Within that 109, they get to take $20,000 of that as vacation and sick time, et cetera. So it comes out of that 109, and then it's replaced by another officer will take that spot. That's why we pay 5.5 for an FTE as opposed to 4.5, which is what the time we actually need. So it's calculated somewhere else, all that extra time. I mean, it's built in somewhere else.
There's obviously, well, hopefully there's something else being added in that I just can't see. But I've done this a time or two before, and I certainly can't tie it out. And I'm using the numbers from this year's budget for them. So it should tie out. Or at least I would kind of expect it to.
So when we're looking at a contract, go ahead.
Also, and I'm gonna just roll this grenade out onto the floor. I understand what we can afford and what we can't afford. But one of the reasons that we're here, in my opinion, is because of 2015. And I love my council a lot. And I think some of these decisions are going to have to be made, and I think between the council and the budget committee, they're going to have to decide what we can afford. I don't know that this group can decide for them, because that's what happened before, frankly. The council decided that we couldn't afford the police, and poof, the police went away. Does anybody disagree with that? 4 councilors. Okay.
Good clarification,
I mean, what
Danny.
really happened was the council, the majority of the council and the city manager thought they would be able to save money. That's what happened. I don't think they thought we couldn't afford the police.
Well, it was taken as a budgetary issue.
Yeah, I think that was.
Anyway, it's not helpful to worry about what happened then.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
That took
trying
you
to
literally.
just maybe not go down the same rocky road.
Yeah, for clarification, there were multiple reasons, it wasn't just one, but we had trouble with numbers back then too. This is not new. What you're experiencing now with numbers and not adding up and so forth. But
Well, yeah, and the 3 council members who voted no, 2 of them which are here right now, one of them all suggested, well, we should ask the people. That's a huge decision, is to kill your police department. We should ask them if they want to do a local option levy or put in more money. And the majority, we've already been playing with this for a year, not very publicly, as you guys remember. And then poof, it's gone. So, the other thing I was gonna, and along with what you said, Tanny, the other approach to this negotiation also is to say, all right, all we have in the budget for our law enforcement services is $4.72 million, whatever the number is. What are you gonna give us for that? We'll take whatever you got, because you're the county sheriff, you're responsible to, protect us from crime in the city, and this is all we can give you for it. And we just say, here it is, and just say, Sheriff, take over protecting us. It's not necessarily a good place to be, but on the other hand, we can only pay for what we can play if we can't get them to agree to these numbers. That's just another option to take.
I know, I'm just trying to think of what that could potentially look like in 5 years from now.
That's why the citizens need to be
Yeah.
asked if they want to bring back Troutdale Police, and which
Right.
requires a local option levy. So,
I just want to say something really quick. In all of our talking and our negotiating, Tanny, like, I was looking at those same numbers and thinking, why are they so, they seemed really high and almost double what the actual budgeted salary was. So it doesn't make sense. The county shouldn't be making money on us. And they have a duty to protect us regardless of whether we are using their police services or not. So there's already a baseline service that we're going to get from them that we already pay on our taxes. And Tanny really, teased out those numbers, and it makes a lot of sense. It makes me more and more frustrated. But I want to just kind of go back to something I heard. What the point of this committee, I think, is to tease all these things out and to make a recommendation to council of what the citizens want from their police and fire contracts. And I don't want to get too far off base thinking about we have to get this number, this number, this number. There's a bunch of options I think that we have, but keeping that in mind, what are we wanting? What can we get? I think are like kind of things I'm trying to keep in mind. And if our recommendation is to, I think we're moving towards this point to go back to a Troutdale Police Department. That is also part of what we need to figure out going forward, how we're going to do that and how that process looks. And I know there's people here that have done those type of things before and have had experience with that, but I don't want to lose sight of what we're actually responsible for. and getting and teasing all that information out. So the counselors that aren't here get that information, because eventually, we're the ones making that final decision. And I do not want to have us be uneducated with the facts, but also what the citizens as a whole want as represented in this committee. So
Okay, thank you. I mean, I know that,
Mr. Allen, Mike.
yes, Rich?
I was just thinking that if I were to summarize, just to answer your question, because I kind of just said it was many things, right? And I didn't put a lot of reflection in this, but just sitting here, if I were to respond, I would say that police was the city's largest expense, right? So that's why they were concerned about it. The police is union, we had union, and they had a chance to make more money. So that's why they wanted to do it. Some of the officers were going to have opportunities, better opportunities, but some of the officers were not. So you had a divided police union on that. So you had all these factors going. But at the end of the day, my personal feeling is being part of a larger organization and better benefits and money won out. That's where most of the pressure came from. I don't think it was about service or policing or anything like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but a lot of it was classified as a financial decision, and that should have gone through a different process, if that's what it was.
Yeah, it should have. But there were politics involved, and that's why it wasn't a straight money decision.
That's why I don't like politics.
So as soon as I get a letter back from the sheriff's office, I'll send that email out tomorrow to say I really want one soon, please, please, please. As soon as I get it back, then we'll have something to talk about, and I'll probably call a meeting of the negotiating committee and talk to them about how to respond, and I have some ideas how to respond. We just talked about a couple of them, it's these numbers as I just talked about them, or guys, this is all we can afford, what do you want to do? Because, we're the customer.
So what I wanted to say was, I've been on Facebook looking at MCSO posted for people to know to please, if you want to have your opinions heard, come to tonight's meeting, come to last week's meeting. It was posted. People have been replying to those posts. I forwarded, I just shared it because I wanted more people to come and be involved in their opinions, so we could hear their opinions, so we could take it to the council and say, hey, this is what we've heard. I appreciate those that are here. The opinions of people who have been responding have been very different. So there are about a little bit over half that they're quite pleased with what it is and they want it to stay the same. There are some that have been here longer, because I've known some of the people that are posted, that are interested in the city council to really look at possibly getting our own police back. I want to do what's best for Troutdale. I want to do what is best for our citizens, for our city. I am too very concerned about these numbers, because if I were just to do a budget like this and just tell Rich that, it's about $10 here, $50 there, I can't tell you that it's really that, or I'm really concerned that we're just we're spending more money than what we should be. And I think that when the negotiating team is talking, that I think we really need the answers to these questions. I am really concerned that they're just gonna throw us numbers like this and it's just gonna be, okay, this is what you're gonna have to pay, that's it. We're not budgeting.
And that's the problem with not having any control over what they do on their end and not having your own department, because we can't look at the numbers really, we only have what they give us. That's the frustrating thing about this process. We can't send in our own forensic accountant to confirm what Kenny and I think about these numbers.
Okay.
Anyway,
Any other comments about police? Twyla?
Nothing now. I think we need answers, and I know in our previous discussions, we've talked about what we hope to get out of the new contract, and I'm not seeing a lot of what we're hoping for, but I think further follow-up, hopefully, will answer some of those.
Rich?
No, but I agree with what Tanny's last statement was. If it really was about money and numbers, it should have gone through budget, not through council. That makes sense.
Victoria?
I like your idea of saying this is all we can afford, because we pretty much get minimal service anyway. So how much less are we gonna get?
luckily Troutdale does not have a lot of hotspots for crime, and, which is a blessing. Oh, except for your neighborhood, Tanny, I know, it's different down there. But generally, if you look at the crime reports that we get, it's pretty consistent over the years, last 10 years. I've gone through the last 10 years of reports for stolen cars, assaults, shoplifting. It hasn't gone up in 10 years really at all. Calls for service, it's been pretty consistent. And there's, again, violent crime is almost non-existent. Occasionally we'll get a drug house every couple of years, okay, but it's not as bad as, you know, let's just say the Rockwood portion of Gresham or a lot of areas in Portland. We don't have that, so.
And they do have to cover us some anyway.
Yeah, for some reason I heard there was a rumor the sheriff's office doesn't think they're required to, but I've looked at the statutes myself. I had Ed do a specific research project. The only thing we can find in the statute is it says the county sheriff is responsible for protecting all citizens within the county and arresting people for all crimes. And then it says the sheriff can negotiate with incorporated cities for law enforcement services. That's okay to do that too. But it doesn't say that abrogates the general obligation. Because if we want extra coverage on what the sheriff can provide, because they're controlled by what the budget is approved by the sheriff's office, to the county commissioners. And so if the county commissioners say, we can only afford X amount of deputies for our whole county, but Troutdale says, hold it, they're only gonna be able to respond within 15, 20 minutes of a 911 call. That's not acceptable. We wanna pay for more coverage out here. That's generally what, I think a lot of the thought was behind why a city would have an IGA is, one, to turn over their department like we did, or they want to ensure some extra coverage. Estacade did that for years with Clackamas County. They just paid to have one 40-hour-a-week deputy around the Estacade area, so they knew they had somebody there. City of Sisters contracts with Deschutes County to have 2 deputies in an office so that they have 80 hours of dedicated coverage. It doesn't replace the county coverage that they would get generally, but they just want more coverage and they're willing to pay for more than the county's willing to pay for. So that's generally a lot of where it's been used in the state, is to add that guarantee of extra stuff, not ever to negate. So anyway, I'm waiting for them, if they tell me they don't, I'm waiting for them to tell me where in the statute it says that.
Okay. Tammy, anything else?
I was just gonna say, and I agree with everything we're saying, but also too, it's like, when we talk about they're gonna cover us anyhow, I think that's a really big word.
Yeah, what does that mean, cover it?
What does that mean?
Again, it's dependent upon the budget approved by the county commissioners.
Does that mean we're gonna have 5 of them here? Does that mean they're all gonna be in Hood River? I mean, what does that mean? I don't know.
Dave?
Well, I was wondering if we can't get an answer out of their budget office, I'm just thinking of a negotiating tactic, that we put together a budget with the numbers that we understand, make it what we can afford, of course, and say, this is what we're going to agree to. Tell us why not. If we've asked nicely, we've asked pleadingly, we've asked in various ways. for answers. We're not getting them. So we put together this budget, and I don't know if we can do that, but, you know, it seems like we've got numbers to do it. And say, we want, you know, and put together our city proposal, and say, this is what we're going to agree to. And the idea being to put a little pressure on them. I don't know. I can't think of another way to go, really.
Yeah.
If we said, well, look, we're not gonna use your services at all, and we'll contract with, who knows?
Yeah.
Gresham, somebody, that would get their attention. So, I don't know. I agree with everything I've heard, as far as the issues, but we've gotta, we don't have a lot of cards to play, but it seems like they want a contract with us, so we'll say, okay, if you won't give us numbers, we'll give you numbers that we can live with. I don't know, it's a thought.
Jeffrey, anything else on police?
No, actually, Dave, that was a really, like, I think a thought that I had also, so I like that thought process. I feel like until we get these numbers and these answers back, it's really hard for us to make an educated decision whatsoever. So I don't really have anything until something comes back.
Yeah, but throw it back at them to
Yeah.
tell us where we're wrong.
All right, you ready for
Yep.
fire?
I am. Fire, all right. The fire contract, Tammy's gone, so I can talk about him. He had a question, he emailed me too about, you know, is the contract negotiating committee that was established to deal with the sheriff's office, they weren't technically tasked by the council with being involved in the fire contract, and should they be? It's a legitimate question. Because so far, the fire issues have been negotiated by the city managers, and as of today, there was a four city manager meeting today over in Gresham to talk about the issue. And we've had correspondence that I've shared with everybody over the period of time. The fundamental difference in negotiating the fire contract is we're not negotiating for a level of service. We're not negotiating for FTE. We're negotiating to get the same service the citizens of Gresham get. That's the only delivery promise they made in our original contract. You'll get the same service you've always had, which is the same as Gresham residents get. So there's no negotiating about FTEs and how many people here and there and the stations. The agreement is you'll just call, you know, as often as your own residents, you'll respond to calls the same way. So it's just a number issue is what we're dealing with them. It's not any level of service issue. Because, you know, fire is fundamentally different. They come when you call as opposed to be looking for things going on. So at this point, I don't know, at this late point of the game, in February, that it's worth including them or not, since we're dealing with numbers, if that just continuing now with, you know, that now that Dave's involved, I'm more than happy if this committee makes a recommendation to council that they should go ahead and turn over to Councilor One, Mayor Ripma, Tanny, and Ed and I, the authority to do the actual negotiations with Gresham. The other issue that's different with fire is that we're in a joint contract with two other cities. And it's kind of impractical and odd to negotiate it separately from them. Okay, we're gonna agree to this deal on fire, and Fairview gets this one, and Wood Village gets another one, so negotiating differently. So it's hard to kind of put on an island our negotiating on fire that doesn't involve the other two cities, because we're all in the same boat. And so those are just questions. I'm not necessarily looking for an answer, but just knowing that that's an issue that you could speak to if you wanted to, and disagree and say, no, I wanna make sure that that group that does the sheriff is involved in it or not, or continue right now. But on the fire contract, I mean, you read my letter I sent last week to the Gresham City Manager, and Dave sent a letter to the other two mayors about our position. And the thing that, as you can tell from my letter, and I'll speak for myself, what annoys me most is that we've operated under an understanding for 30 years that we would pay Gresham the increased cost of it, of what it would cost for to add people to cover our areas out here. And we've never paid one for one with their residents, the same price because we don't have that. And that is a change. Now, Gresham has the perfect right to change that. They're not obligated beyond July 1st to give us that similar model. And even though the Gresham mayor and I disagreed today, I think our numbers, our calculations, we were paying like 73, 75 cents on the dollar this last year versus what a Gresham resident pays. He said it was 85%. But I said, well, great, Mayor, we agree. We don't pay the same rate, and you've agreed for 10 years that we don't pay the same rate. But then again, like the sheriff's contract, Mayor Stovall was not there in 2015. The council was radically different in both cities in 2015. It was a whole different ballgame, and they're not bound to continue that. So we are, he liked to say today in our meeting, and Dave, you can report on your take from the meeting today too, but he said, he liked to say, we don't want to feel like we have you over a barrel, but you do. That's the thing, you do have us over a barrel. I can't say to you, well, we're not gonna pick from you because we're gonna pick from A, B, and C over here. Troutdale has no place to go for fire other than Gresham for the foreseeable next couple of years. There's just no option out there for us. Even if you join the Fire District 10, Fire District 10 contracts with Gresham. If you go to a fire district, you have to have more than just Troutdale. You have to have more than Troutdale, Wood Village, and Fairview, because there's not enough tax base to support a fire district in just those three cities, or even with Fire District 10. Fire District 10, it says if you could organize Fire District 10 in the three cities, there still is not enough money to really finance with the economics of scale of fire department. You've got to get Gresham in on that. So we need to work with Gresham any way we look at it on this thing. So today, so they are pushing that, as I may have mentioned or may have seen before, I don't remember what. And like I said, I had so many conversations, I never know what, but they came back last fall with, I think I'd give you the letter from September 24th from the Gresham City Manager. They say, hey, we want the three cities to now pay one for one, the exact same amount as Gresham residents pay for their fire service. So you're our equal partners. I always bristle at that phrase. We're not equal at all because nobody asked us, as you see my letter, when to fire or hire a police chief, a fire chief, how to make your budgets. However, I can't say that they're doing a bad job of any of those necessarily, okay? Mayor Stovall pushed back at me today that, well, we didn't fire Chief Snyder, he quit on his own. Okay, that's the public statement, and that's what they said out loud. I just talked to all the players involved in it, and I know he would rather not have had to quit. But the conditions were such that he could no longer tolerate staying there, so they made it not possible for him to stay. And, you've all worked places, that's pretty much telling you to quit, or telling you you're fired, make it too hard for you. Has anybody seen the old movie, Office Space?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my stapler, they did everything they could to make it unpleasant for him to stay there, but he never quit. They were trying to get him to quit so they didn't have to fire him. That's what they did. So, but the point is that they have the right to say that's how we're going to change things. And we don't have control. We may get slightly slower response times. But I will tell you, in all honesty, and I told this to the mayor as we were leaving the meeting, after the meeting was over, is that, your best argument is our citizens don't care who controls the Gresham Fire Department as long as they show up to put out my house fire. Or they show up because, somebody's fallen over and they need, paramedic help. As long as they show up, I don't care who controls it. And that is a reasonable argument. And even though we do get slightly slower response times, 40 seconds on average, but I can't tell him that caused any more property damage or any more injury or any more death in the city of Troutdale, because it is slower. I can't tell him a demonstrative reason why that is some way to prove it's bad to us. It just doesn't look good. But he pushed back. I disagree with some of the things he pushed back, and you heard me, Dave. But he says there are areas in Gresham that also get the same response time as Troutdale, potentially, like parts of Rockwood, parts of maybe South Gresham. And he goes, yeah, they're all right. But on average, I said, I was looking average. So we went through this whole meeting today and we got to the point where, that they're pretty much stuck on that for the future. They're believing that they're gonna want us to pay the same as Gresham residents. They are not thrilled or thinking that the idea, anytime soon, a fire district, they don't think it will save them any money. But they talked about, but they didn't acknowledge the issue is the bigger issue with all our problems with fire stations and locations and updating all the capital stuff. You can't do it with the city of Gresham because, as I explained before, the city of Gresham doesn't own the fire station we have on Cherry Park. So why would they pay, why would the Gresham citizens pass a bond levy to improve it? All the studies have said they needed an additional fire station over in the general Fairview Wood Village area. Well, why would the Gresham voters approve a bond levy for a fire station in Gresham Wood Village and Fairview? Why would Fire District 10 have their voters approve a bond levy to improve the fire station in Troutdale? Well, it doesn't serve us, it doesn't help, so why would we do it? And then the Troutdale residents, I don't even know if there's a legal mechanism for the Troutdale residents to approve a bond levy to improve somebody else's fire station or approve a fire station in Wood Village Fairview that presumably might get called to Troutdale calls. And even if they did, with the Troutdale residents want to improve fire stations or build fire stations that we didn't own. I mean, it's just a really complicated thing. And so a fire district is the only solution because if all 5 entities, the 4 cities and Fire District 10 are one fire district, well, then there's one vote for everybody to put fire stations places and to pay for upgrades and things like that. And it makes a lot more sense. That is the only argument that Gresham realizes is that's the only best solution, is that all the people who share in having these fire stations should share in improving the fire stations. Makes perfect sense. So at the end of that meeting today, we ended about 5:10 today, is that the other cities, Wood Village and Fairview, agreed with us. The other problem for us is that Gresham has been dealing with getting more money out of their citizens for years. They've asked for a local option levy they got last year. They had to ask twice. They've started having a utility fee that they started in 2011. They increased it in 2020 to $15 a month, a bill for everybody in the city. So they've been doing all these things, but the rest of us 3 cities, nobody came to us and said, hey, by the way, in 3 or 4 years, we're gonna change the whole methodology about how we want you to pay for fire services. Your fire service cost is gonna go up well over $1 million a year. As I told you, they went from, we're paying 2.8 million this year roughly, to 4.3 million next year, $1.5 million, okay? Well, the only argument that they're willing to give us, and as Mayor, as you noticed, even Mayor Stovall wasn't willing to agree that it was true, he just wasn't gonna argue with me, that's a huge shock into our increases, and it's not really fair to make us pay for it like that in one budget year. So all 3 cities agreed. In Wood Village, they've got a tougher problem. Jairo, the Campos Ramos, I think I got those correct for him, Mayor Campos Ramos. He says, in Gresham and Troutdale and Fairview, the council can approve a utility fee, all right? And if the council, and we're putting it in the budget, and we're gonna ask the council, if they approve the same fee that Gresham does, $15, we would raise $1.3 to $1.4 million, which would be really helping both these increases in both these contracts. And we could do it fast and not have to wait for a vote of the people. Wood Village, they can't do any increases in charges to their citizens without a vote of the people. And so, as Gresham knows, it can take a couple times to get it done. And so they haven't even started in Wood Village. And so for them, they can handle this huge increase for 2 years, and then they're out of savings, they're out of money. And being broke as a city is nowhere to be, because then what do you do then? So they would like to do it sooner than later. So what we left with in the negotiation was the 3 cities need to come up with a joint offer for, all right, I guess that's the methodology we've got to go with. We're going to start looking at other revenue options, but we're going to need, and I think we're tentatively agreed, we need a 3-year break-in period for that to get up to the level that they want, so that we can ask the citizens for different options that could make us more revenue. Such as if they approve a Troutdale Police Department, then we wouldn't have to pay so much of our general fund, it would free up money for the fire department. If the council approves a utility fee, then it gets us an additional 1.3, 1.4. The things that we have to, I have to educate the committees and the citizens of Troutdale is that almost every city in Oregon either has a higher permanent tax rate for property taxes than Troutdale, or they're part of a fire district, which saves them money on the general fund. They have utility fees that save them money in the general, get them more income, and they have a local option levy to pay for these additional services. Troutdale, Wood Village, and Fairview, unlike all these other cities in Oregon and Gresham, have not had to do that at all. We're behind the curve in this state for the cities that have recognized that to continue services at this level, we are going to have to figure out how the citizens pay more, and there's different ways to do that. It's just the reality that every other city in the state is faced with and has come up with these answers, and we just not been to that Rubicon yet, and we're gonna have to. I tell them that the combined increases between police and fire, if we don't do anything with more income, that's more than our Parks Department. You can just lop off our $2 million Parks Department in our budget, and we still won't have enough to cover the increases they're asking for right now. Okay, unless we pay down all our, I call it savings, you know, the ending fund balance, which is about probably 8.5 million or so at this year, that will vanish really fast, and then we're broke. And then what are we gonna do? Then we'll have to go ask for citizens' money, or we'll have to cut the Parks Department, or let your imagination go wild, but the city's gotta look at its financial viability in the long term. And so we finished with the idea that trying to buy ourselves time is try to get 3 years break-in period for the higher rate so that it doesn't go up so immediately, so fast. And I explained to them, and I'll explain it in the letter because different cities have different reasons. We're hit with a double whammy this year because we're getting both sheriff's office and police. Nobody else has that in this fire and police. So that's one of the reasons why we need a break-in period. But trying to get it, you know, at a lower increase. And so Mayor Gresham says, all right, I have to convince my council. I asked him, do you think this is reasonable? Because if you don't think it's reasonable, how are you gonna sell it to your council? He danced around. He didn't say either way. I just need you to explain it so that I can try to explain it to them. Okay, so that's what we're left with right now, is the three cities coming up with a common, hopefully 3-year break-in period, and our own explanation of why we should have a 3-year break-in period, and then he can take that to his council. So that's my report on what we spent over an hour and a half today on. Mayor Ritma, what's your take on what we did today and where you think the fire contract is at?
All right, the Gresham is proposing a population-based methodology for determining how much the cities pay, strictly population. Ray's letter, which if you haven't read it, it lays out all the reasons why we never did it that way. We never did it that way. We always agreed to pay Gresham for the extra cost of serving our cities, not straight population-based calculation, which gave us a better deal, but we also got less service. Ray's arguments were completely ignored by Gresham. I could just, you know, in short,
I failed.
they said,
I get it.
they
I
said
failed.
no. I was convinced. All right, my observation, neither Wood Village nor Fairview wanted to pick up the mantle of the argument you made, which I thought was very cogent, and they're basically conceding to Gresham's wish to have a population-based methodology. It'll actually end up costing them proportionally more than us, but they're asking that, and the three cities need to work together, but they're asking for more time, phase it in, but actually no substantive challenge to the methodology. Very disappointing.
Hence, we're over a barrel argument.
Well, the district idea seems to be, as far as I could tell from the little bit it was discussed, Gresham doesn't seem to have a handle on that, any logical handle on forming a district. A district, what it would be a fire district of basically the 4 cities. Might include District 10, might even extend into Clackamas County. But it would be on the model of the Holland Valley District in Washington County or something. It would provide fire services. The citizens of our cities would vote for a board to run that district and vote for a tax base and adopt a tax base for the district. And it wouldn't be Gresham in control or Troutdale in control of our area. It'd be the citizens of the entire district. It has its disadvantages, but as Ray said, a lot of cities have had to go to that because of the inability to pay for basic services in the cities, and the fire is a logical one to form a district. But that isn't going to save us this year. We need to, well, actually, what Fairview and Wood Village and Troutdale will have to go along is we're pleading for more time to phase in the higher cost. The idea of Troutdale voters okaying more revenue for fire services, I'm not very optimistic. It would be like a fee attached to the water bill or something. That's, I think, the way Gresham does it.
Yes.
And I can imagine that wouldn't be very popular. So, but we're up against it. I don't know if there's any other options for us to pay for fire services. I one time talked to Ed about breaking off the EMT services provided by the fire department and just relying on the county contract with AMR. I don't know where that is. It's never been mentioned, but that would substantially reduce the cost of the services we got from Gresham, but they wouldn't be very happy about it, and I don't know if there's time to implement something like that. Any thoughts on that, Ray?
No, because the problem is that the county is the sole arbitrator of transportation services for, those kind of things. And 4 of the 5 council commissioners don't give a damn about Troutdale.
Well,
And they've shown, as you saw last year, when they resisted being reasonable with the ambulance staffing, they just have their own mind about how they want to do it, and they just want to control it.
that's true, although it seemed like Ed thought there was a legal obligation for the county to provide the service, whether they want to or not.
When it
But
comes
anyway,
to fire, we haven't found that yet. Nobody's shown me things where
Okay,
the county
this
has
isn't
provided fire.
the
Yeah,
place to talk about that, but basically, I'm agreeing with, I watched the meeting unfold today, and Gresham, basically wasn't listening to reason, as far as I could tell. And they want to go with a population-based methodology like that. It's so logical, where for 30 years, it hasn't been necessary to do it that way. Hasn't been demanded by Gresham before. But if that's in their mindset, I haven't thought of any good counter to that, other than Fairview and Wood Village don't want to fight it. This is just an observation. I shouldn't prejudge what they're planning to do, but they didn't seem like, they were not in the mode of agreeing with Ray's argument that we pay less because we get less service, slightly slower response times, but we traditionally for 30 years have not had to pay the full freight for services that Gresham had to provide anyway, and there was no additional cost for having us receive service, like, for instance, a fire chief. Gresham has to have one anyway. We piggyback on that and have been for 30 years, but anyway, so it was a disappointing outcome, but at least Gresham is willing to listen to extending the drop of the guillotine,
yeah.
I guess, perhaps a year or two.
The mayor did not commit anything, but he didn't reject it.
No, no.
Help me explain it to my council, how it's done. Just so you'll know, the other cities, Wood Village, I just pulled up their budget. This year, they're paying $569,000 for their fire. This proposal from Gresham would have originally had them go to almost $1 million. So about a 45% increase in their fire rates. Ours was roughly 50%. So the Fairview and Wood Village are in the same exact boat as us in terms of impact on the general fund budget, percentage-wise. It's huge, and they're, like I
I
said.
thought theirs might even be more, but okay.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Anyway,
they're paying.
So it was roughly
Yeah,
the same.
569, and it's gonna go up to 967. So,
Anyway,
yeah, so,
my observation.
anyway, so at this point with them, what we left it with is the three cities hopefully can agree that we're gonna ask for a 3-year phase-in of the cost, because we need time to give our citizens the option of paying more, our council and the citizens an option of paying more to cover these increased costs. And then prepare a letter from each city that says, this is why, in our particular situation, we need to have a break-in period.
Yeah, I mean, Gresham, if Gresham was planning to do this all along, I don't know if the new manager or the negotiator, what was his name?
Eric Schmidt?
Eric, yeah, was, how long he's been with Gresham, but,
Well, he's been with Gresham for about 25, 30 years, but he's only been the city manager since last summer.
okay. Anyway, we were expecting, we meaning Troutdale, was expecting perhaps a continuation of the contracts we'd had before, where we would pay some high fraction of the cost of Gresham, but not a population-based methodology. And Gresham didn't inform us until pretty recently that they're,
September 24th, that letter from,
all right.
was the first time we heard they were changing the methodology.
And of course, we were in hopes that they would listen to our very reasonable arguments.
Yeah.
But it didn't work, so.
Okay, is there any comments regarding fire? Tammy?
From me. Couple things, like over the past 8 years, we've gone up 54%. That's like an average of about 7% a year. And we're taking this to like 50% increase over 3 years. On a bigger number, that's pretty significant. I understand what they're up against. The other thing that's kind of hard, and even when you look at a fire district, we're gonna be paying the same as Gresham, and unless somebody's seeing something else, we're gonna get less. Even in a fire district, our people are gonna pay the same and they're gonna get less. I'm not sure how well that's gonna work. And we also talked about this before too. I just don't know about going out for a police levy, then following that up with a fire district, then following that up with city hall or whatever else we have on the docket. And what happens if our citizens do say no? Do any of it or all of it? I'm not sure how we manage that. I don't know what our options are. I'd love to try to explore something because I think some of this is unrealistic. Not on our part, on their part. To pay the same when we don't own any assets. I don't know how we justify that.
Rich?
Oh, also, one last thing
Yes.
that could minorly be factored into this. They lost their best customer, Cherry Park Plaza.
Yes, they did.
That was their number one call volume that they had, and that's gone. I know that's not a big factor, but that is less calls. Significantly less calls because they were there a lot.
And, but the thing is about calls is whether you call us or not, we're ready to come. And that's why you can't base it on call volume because,
Well, you can't because they're on a call,
yeah.
you know?
Rich?
Let's see if I can remember all this. Do you remember our housing study, medium income and the housing within Troutdale?
Mm-hmm.
That population right there, they're getting squeezed right now. We haven't hit the bottom. So I'm thinking the minute we tell them that they're gonna have to pay more, we're really gonna be scrutinized over whether we're getting a reasonable deal. There's people on our population that will comb that pretty thoroughly, right? So we
You mean the
are going to have
residents?
to make sure that we do a good job. I'm not saying we're not, because I think you've been doing great.
Right. But the issue is that forces the issue to when they're gonna have to come up, what do you want to have for an alternative?
Yeah,
Right.
and so one thing I don't understand is, and maybe you can help me with this, we're a medium-sized city for this state. And yet all the other cities have fire service. So I didn't really understand how we couldn't do something if we weren't with Fairview and Wood Village, who typically, historically, go along with Gresham, right? I'm glad to hear they're willing to do the phase-in, so that's good news. And we should be talking with the other cities. But I don't know if there's some factor in there that, you know, fire for smaller cities are mixed in with county fire service as well. And their buildings are typically as tall, that has a factor. But I'm just saying, we're gonna have to be very careful here and make sure that we've crossed our Ts and dotted our Is. We can't afford to be sloppy on this one. We're gonna be scrutinized.
Toya?
Yeah, I was, just as you were talking about the population-based methodology, and moving to that over the 3 years and that increased cost to the citizens, was there any room for negotiation around like the assets? That if we are gonna be paying this additional money, we can somehow have some asset or at least FaceTime. I know with police, they come to PSAC and they, once a month, do reports out and we haven't seen fire at all. So maybe one of those.
The current contract requires them to do an annual report to the city council. Additionally, we have a bi-monthly meeting among the 4 cities where they basically tell us what's happening, you know, update on what's going on at the Gresham Fire Department. One of the things that they put in their letter, because I kept screaming, you know, you just keep us in the dark about what's going on. They're proposing a new, more than just the fire user board, which is what we currently have, that just kind of receives information, that we have a user board that actually can engage in what struggles are you going? Are you deciding to buy a new fire truck? Are you deciding, are there concerns about this, that? And then get our feedback, not that we have any right to order them doing things, but at least have a meaningful input into the, and that's why I said, we, at least for this extra money, we should get a meaningful input. Gresham City Council and the Gresham City Manager will never give us the right to veto or agree to a hiring or a firing of a fire chief, okay, even though he's our fire chief too. But at least give us a say. I suggested maybe on one of the interview panels you do, at least give us a spot on one of the interview panels. Your firefighters get a spot on it, your citizens usually get a spot on it. Why shouldn't we at least be included as even one person from the 3 cities?
I thought that was just window dressing, you know.
Well, it is.
They're just renaming.
It is, but at least it gives us a direction to at least say, we like it or we don't like it, you know.
Agreed, because I think it's gonna be really hard for people to swallow, that additional huge cost without anything changing. We're not getting anything different.
That's a good point. We have the one fire station. That's usually all you see. I mean, sometimes you see the one that's to the south of us, right? Come this way. But for the most part, it's the one fire station. And we have, what, 3 fires a year? How much is it costing them? And what's that cost compared to what they're asking from us?
All they have to go on is they have their budget for what it costs them to do the whole department, and that's just what they want to pay. That's what the Gresham citizens pay based upon a percentage, and so the 3 cities should pay the same way for the same fire department.
Well, we clearly don't get the same service.
or the same patrol, but they say, too bad.
And AMR does have to cover us. They don't
Well, they have to
choice.
have us for ambulance service, yes.
Yeah.
But not for fire, not for coming because, somebody, I guess you could call, the people would have to call if there's a heart attack, you have to call an ambulance. But as Gresham learned last year, the ambulance numbers may be out of the calls. They may not have enough ambulances out there. The Gresham police had to haul a person who was shot to the hospital because an ambulance wasn't available. And that's the problem you run into, relying too much on the ambulance service that's contracted, again, controlled by the county commission, contracted with a private company, and we have no control over how big the asset is available and how can they respond to time. At least we know in Troutdale, with the fire department, there's an emergency rig with 2 EMTs on it, right in pretty much the middle geographically of Troutdale, and it will come when we call and be there if somebody needs medical attention immediately. That's what AMR can't provide us and the county can't provide us.
We're assuming it gets dispatched, so we should probably ask our people
Yeah.
what their most recent experience is on emergency calls. I bet it'd be very enlightening.
Well, in the public safety survey the PSAC just did, I mean, generally people are satisfied with the fire department services they're getting. For the limited nature of that survey, which wasn't scientific, but it was, 170 or so people responded to it, and that gives you an indication. And because normally when people respond to surveys, you're more likely to get people who are unhappy with something than are happy with something. So you assume it's gonna be tilted toward being negative, but it was still positive about the service they get from the fire department. And in the 8+ years I've been in this position, I've never heard a complaint about the actual fire department personnel and how they conduct themselves. Lots of complaints on 911 and response time and answering the phone, whether it's non-emergency or emergency, but not in terms of the actual people who deliver the service.
No, the people who deliver the service, both
Yeah.
on fire and police,
Yeah.
have been wonderful.
Victoria? Juan? Do you have anything to add, Jeffrey?
No, because it doesn't seem like we have any options.
Yeah.
So,
Always have options.
well, I mean, the option is to go to a fire district where you probably pay the same that we're going to be paying, but you have some sort of control and there's some sort of mechanism in place to build and upgrade facilities as a whole. And then you're really then you're really one together. But in the scenario now, like Gresham, obviously from what I hear from Ray and from Dave is that have no desire to bargain with us. It's like take it or leave it, which is obviously disappointing. But I don't know. I didn't hear any positivity in trying to, is of any progress being able to be made.
Sorry, I missed that last part.
Oh, I just don't have, I mean, it doesn't sound like there's any positivity in towards be able to make progress towards getting something better for the citizens other than what they're offering.
There
So
is,
they kind of a take it or leave it. I mean, and so what do we do?
that's it. The pathway forward for long-term, because I never, and nobody, human being, likes to be in a situation where they have no negotiating room at all. It's a horrible place to be. And when the council gave up the police department, they gave up negotiating our law enforcement services. When the citizens agreed to leave Fire District 10 back in the 1990s and trust Gresham was going to take care of them, they gave up control, because at least even though Mayor Stovall poo-pooed the idea of control, at least Troutdale citizens got to vote on board members, okay? They had a real vote, just like on council. And, Mayor Ribbon, I was gonna look at him and say, so you're telling me that it's no big deal that your citizens voted for you and that's no right that they should worry about? Well, because he got elected by the same voters who elect the fire boards, okay? It's like, why would you poo-poo that power of the citizens when you're there under the same power? Anyway, I just let it go. Well, it's on the public record now, but it just seemed contradictory, anyway, that argument. But be that as it may, I think for the long term, the only options we have is that probably pursuing a Troutdale Fire Department, a police department because we can afford to do that in the long run. We have a building, beautiful building for a police department. We don't have to acquire any asset to do it. The cost of a Troutdale Police Department this year, DAX dollars, is about $6 million. Right now, the sheriff's at 6.7, so heck, let's get a deal and do our own. However, hopefully we're gonna get them lower than the 6 million, but still, we still have the same problem of no control, no negotiating space, and 10, 20 years down the road, they may get meaner and nastier on squeezing us for money. And the other biggest issue we still have, I will tell you, I deal with this for 8.5 years. I love the deputies that patrol this city. They do a great job. I love our resource deputy. Our police chiefs have all been great. But the problem is, every time we want them to do something, I have to ask nicely. Every time I want them, they go out to do something, as Frank was talking about with the homeless issue, they have to go out and proceed under not what we would see the law is, but they have to proceed under what Multnomah County policy is for the sheriff's deputies and how they deal with parked cars and RVs and the homeless and camping in places. They have to follow the rules that come out of people at, I always say, 5th and Hawthorne, which is the Multnomah County building. And those policies come out of a department that has 4 of the 5 commissioners, as I said, that don't give a dang about Troutdale. And we also know that this has been the joke for 30, 40 years, that East County is a completely different county than West County. I always tell people, if you just look at the election for president, west of I-205, Kamala Harris won 85 to 87% of the vote. In Troutdale, it was like a 50-50 tie, okay? There's a radical difference in how people view the world in East County than in that part. And so it's like giving them control of our law enforcement is always going to be there, and it's always going to deliver us a service that doesn't necessarily match the community values. And you all know that, you know, I was your prosecutor beginning in 1983 in Immunity Court. I was your judge for 27 years. And I will tell you, having a Troutdale Police Department, their responsiveness, them caring about the community, this has been the only place that they work for. And I could just tell you stories of having our own was so much more advantageous than trusting this other agency to come in like, you know, interlopers to do it. I mean, my staff will tell you, right now, in the old days, the staff that were here then, my managers, if they had a problem, person out there, they could call the patrol officer directly. They could call the sergeant directly and say, hey, Joel, can you get Dave Boyce out here, or whoever it is, because I got a problem. Boom, you don't have to wait for an hour and a half on non-emergency. They would go take care of it. Right now, the sheriff's office pretty much says, well, you have to call non-emergency. Now, I do get special dispensation when Frank calls, only for Frank's calls. But no, when we have homeless issues, that is such an important issue, and I've told our chief that I go around, you know, that process to get those things dealt with. But this, over the years, this is what you lose when you don't have your own police department. And so I say all that to say that if we're gonna ask the citizens for extra money on a bond levy, yes, Councilor One, getting them to agree to $25 million to build a new city hall, not gonna excite them too much. Ask them to join a fire district, to create a fire district that they're only part of and don't really control, and doesn't change what they're getting, right? Because we're still gonna get the same coverage. The fire service is gonna show up. But the police, if you do a local option levy for police, which will take us at least 2 to 4 years minimum to get one in place and operational, if they approve a local option levy, that's the one that I say probably, and you live in the neighborhoods, you talk to the people, that has really the only one of those that has at least a cachet of, yeah, sure, it will cost us more, but I will actually see real world improvement in what I'm getting. That's why I think that's the only one that in the next 5 years probably has a chance, because building a city hall, which would be great for the city, great for staff, great for our service delivery, the citizens won't really notice in their daily lives a change in it. The fire department, as I said, they won't really notice a change in their daily lives. But if they have cars that go by and actually go into their neighborhoods that say Troutdale Police on the side of them, they will notice that difference.
Ray, which,
So anyway, I'm on my soapbox. Mayor had me this afternoon on it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on this one, but that's what we have to think about for the future, and that's...
Ray, what you just stated from beginning to end very well summarizes what has been weighing heavy on my mind the most. I think that was very well put.
And I'm about ready to write another article for the Champion that I have, it's supposed to be due to yesterday, it's supposed to be due on Monday, I'm going on vacation, but I'm gonna get it done. The top of the fold article for the Champion next time is going to be police and fire services go through the roof, our costs are gonna go through the roof, regardless of the number we arrive on. And so I will explain that both Multnomah County and Gresham are changing the way they bill us, which is causing huge increases in our costs. And then I'll say the council is gonna start looking at options for us, and these are the options they're gonna look at. And I will say that, you know, we have two huge issues in our budget that we have to deal with. We've got to start dealing with them. In the long term, the only one, as I just said, is probably getting our police department back, is the one that's probably is the easiest for us to do, because there's no way for us to get a fire department in this city. It's just too small to afford one. Is the police department, but the citizens are gonna have to want it. And I will say, the reasons I think you should want it are A, B, C, D, but that's coming attractions. You're not getting asked immediately to vote for that, but it's something you need to be aware of, that your council's gonna be dealing with it, your budget committee's gonna be dealing with it, and this issue is gonna come up to you in the long term. So I just wrote my article right there, but that's what the citizens need to know. Whoever reads, you know, the Champion. It's like, you know, this last 6 months, I've written 2 articles with the same kind of thing, warning them that this issue is coming. But anyway.
Okay, thank you. Let's set a meeting for next time, number 6. So today's the 10th, so we're looking, you know, if we're looking a month down, or are we looking 6 weeks down? When is it that you want to meet?
I mean, the only date certain we have out there for some event to happen, and it's just the council meeting, is that I'm planning to do a work session on March 18th, Tuesday night, to discuss alternative revenue options as a short-term fix to our budget concerns. Utility fee I talked about, and some other things that we have that we're recommending. But that doesn't necessarily change the work of this committee to a certain degree. I mean, I'm hopefully, again, I'm gonna ask, again, like with all these things, I just have to ask nicely. Can you please get back to my letter about the more information we want from the sheriff's office? And if they get it by the 24th, then having a meeting the first or second week of March, hopefully I'd have something that we can talk about. But as you know, the rule is don't have a meeting just to have a meeting.
Right.
So we have to do something, you have to schedule time. So I would suggest, Chairman, the week of the 10th, March 10th, you know, there's a council meeting on the 11th, but we've always met on either Thursdays or Mondays, the 10th or the 13th.
Jeffrey, does that work for you, March 10th?
Yeah, that I can do that.
Does that work for everybody else?
Works for me.
Yeah.
All right, that's our next meeting, then we'll do it on the 10th of March. Same bat time, same bat location.
What was a
For
good
old people,
meeting?
remember that.
I would love to entertain a motion to adjourn.
But
Oh, no?
did we
Sorry.
decide how we're handling the fire contract? I was out of the room for,
Yeah, I guess the simple question, is there any sense that we need to change the oversight of the fire contract at this point? Recommend to the council that they change it. I mean, I'm more than happy the next time we have a meeting on the sheriff's contract, just to update, you know, because Dave's been involved, is gonna be now involved, very involved, Mayor, in the fire contract. And so I'm happy to involve Ed and Tanny and Jeffrey at our next meeting, to at least update them on it.
So no change. I would say we'll try to get more time to phase in the,
well, I mean, the change is we haven't been really, as a team, working on the fire contract. I guess I could say. A little bit.
well, I don't know, we did tonight, anyway.
No,
Maybe I
negotiate.
misunderstand.
That's right, I forgot, I'm sorry. So Ray, you talked earlier about, or it was talked about earlier about a negotiating team for fire.
Right, the council decided, based on our discussions in here several months ago, to appoint a special smaller group that could meet more nimbly to talk about, to the police contract. And I think part of the reason is because the police contract has so many moving pieces. And if you're sitting face to face in a negotiating room, it's really hard to have too many people in the room and to discuss it on a short-term basis. And again, we're discussing FTEs and numbers that, in the fire contract, it's radically different. We're simply talking about, since we're not getting them moved off, their ultimate goal is the one-to-one population methodology. We just have to figure out how we can convince them to give us time to be able to adjust to that new reality. And I don't know if you need to especially entail any small committee to also do that one too. I don't know if it, because we're gonna keep you updated the same anyway. And like I said, whenever we meet for the police contract, I'm gonna update the same group on it. At this point in the game, we're 6 months out, it's close to council needs to be more involved in it, because they're gonna be the ones ultimately who have to say yay or nay on the budget and budget changes and on the contracts. So, anyway, I don't know what more input you can give onto the fire, because it's not a service level issue, it's just in dollars and cents.
Dollars and cents.
Or no sense.
Does that answer your question, Tammy?
I guess so.
Okay, now, I would like to have somebody a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
This is Twilight second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? All right, thank you for coming out. Have a good evening. Right, we are adjourned.